The airplane was almost full. Passengers were finding their seats, placing bags above their heads, and talking loudly. The sound of engines outside mixed with soft music inside the cabin. Everything felt normal, just another flight on a busy day. No one knew that something shocking was about to happen. A black woman slowly entered the plane. She looked calm and quiet. She was in her early 40s. She wore simple clothes, no expensive bag, no jewelry, nothing that showed wealth. Her hair was tied neatly. Her face showed tiredness, but also dignity. She held her boarding pass carefully and walked down the aisle, looking for her seat. Some passengers looked at her for a second, then looked away. Others judged her silently. A few people whispered, thinking she was just another ordinary passenger. No one smiled at her. No one greeted her. She did not seem to care. She just kept walking. A flight attendant noticed her and frowned. The flight attendant was young and confident. She had a sharp voice and a proud attitude. She looked at the woman from head to toe, then walked toward her quickly. "Excuse me," the flight attendant said in a cold tone. "Can I see your ticket?" The woman stopped and handed over her boarding pass politely. She did not say a word. The flight attendant looked at the ticket, then looked at the woman again with doubt in her eyes. "This seat is not for you," the flight attendant said loudly. Some passengers nearby turned their heads to watch. The woman spoke softly. "This is my seat. You can check again." The flight attendant's face became angry. "People like you always try to sit where you don't belong," she said without shame. The words hurt, but the woman stayed calm. She did not raise her voice. She did not argue. She just stood there quietly while everyone watched. A man sitting nearby felt uncomfortable but said nothing. A woman across the aisle shook her head but stayed silent. Phones slowly came out. Some passengers started recording. "I said move," the flight attendant shouted. "You are delaying everyone." The woman took a deep breath. "Please speak respectfully," she said in a low, steady voice. That sentence made the flight attendant angrier. Without thinking, without warning, she raised her hand and slapped the woman across the face. The sound of the slap echoed through the cabin. Everything stopped. People gasped. Someone dropped their phone. The cabin became silent in 1 second. Even the flight attendant looked shocked at what she had just done, but only for a moment. The woman did not fall. She did not scream. She did not fight back. Her head turned slightly from the force. Her cheeks slowly turned red. Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not let them fall. She touched her face gently and looked straight at the flight attendant. There was no anger in her eyes. Only pain and control. "You had no right," the woman said quietly. The flight attendant crossed her arms. "You should know your place," she replied coldly. Some passengers felt ashamed. Others looked away. A few still thought the flight attendant was right. No one stood up for the woman. The woman slowly picked up her small bag and walked to her seat without another word. She sat down calmly, as if nothing had happened. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her face remained strong. Inside her, memories rushed back. Years of being judged. Years of being treated badly. Years of silence. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again. She reached into her bag and took out her phone. No one noticed. She typed one short message. Just a few words. Her finger did not shake when she pressed send. The flight attendant walked away, feeling powerful. She believed she had won. She believed the story was over. But the woman looked out of the window calmly and whispered to herself, so softly that no one could hear. "This plane will not fly today." And at that moment, far away from the cabin, something began to change. The woman sat quietly in her seat near the window. Outside, the sky was bright and clear, but inside her chest, everything felt heavy. Her cheeks still burned from the slap. She kept her face turned slightly away so no one could see the pain in her eyes. She refused to cry in front of strangers who had already judged her. Around her, whispers began to spread. Passengers leaned toward each other and spoke in low voices. Some shook their heads, some smirked, and some pretended not to notice anything at all. A few people thought the woman must have done something wrong. Others believed she deserved the treatment. Very few felt sympathy, and even fewer felt brave enough to speak. The flight attendant walked down the aisle with confidence. Her back was straight, her face proud. She believed she had taught the woman a lesson. In her mind, authority meant power, and power meant never being questioned. She did not look back at the woman even once. A middle-aged man across the aisle glanced at the woman, then looked away quickly. He did not want trouble. A young girl watching from 2 rows back felt confused and scared, but her mother gently pulled her closer and whispered, "Don't stare." The woman took a slow, deep breath. She placed her bag under the seat and folded her hands neatly on her lap. On the outside, she looked calm. On the inside, her heart was racing. Not from fear, but from something else. A decision was forming. She picked up her phone again. This time, she did not hide it. She unlocked the screen and read a message that had just arrived. It was short. Only 1 line. She nodded slightly, as if someone had just answered her question. She typed another message, even shorter than the first. She did not add emotion. She did not explain. She simply sent it and placed the phone face down on her lap. The engines outside began to grow louder. Passengers started putting on their seat belts. The usual sounds of a plane preparing for takeoff filled the cabin. Life was moving on, as if nothing serious had happened. The flight attendant picked up the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please fasten your seat belts. We will be taking off shortly," she said with a cheerful voice, as if the slap had never happened. The woman looked straight ahead. Her face showed no anger, only patience. Minutes passed. Then something strange happened. The engines slowed down. The sound changed. The plane did not move forward. Passengers looked at each other with confusion. Some checked their watches. Others looked out the windows. The captain's voice came over the speaker, but this time it sounded tense. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing a short delay. Please remain seated." A short delay. That was all he said. The flight attendant's smile faded slightly. She exchanged looks with another crew member. This was unusual. Everything had been ready. The woman remained silent. She crossed her legs calmly and stared out of the window again. The city outside looked small and distant, just like the people who thought they knew her. A man 2 seats away leaned forward and whispered to his friend, "Why are we not moving?" His friend shrugged. "Maybe a technical issue." More minutes passed. The cabin grew restless. People shifted in their seats. Some sighed loudly. Others complained under their breath. The flight attendant walked toward the front of the plane, her heels clicking fast against the floor. She spoke quietly with another crew member. Her confident posture began to weaken. Inside the cockpit, the captain was listening to a call. His eyebrows slowly pulled together. His hand tightened around the radio. He asked the same question twice, just to be sure he heard correctly. "Yes," came the reply. "Do not proceed." The captain swallowed hard. Back in the cabin, the woman felt the plane completely still. She closed her eyes for a moment, not in pain this time, but in control. She remembered every insult she had faced in her life. Every time she was treated as less. Every moment she chose silence over anger. This was not about revenge. This was about truth. The captain finally spoke again through the speaker. His voice was different now. Serious. Careful. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said slowly, "please remain seated. This flight will not take off until further notice." The cabin filled with noise. What? Why? What's going on? The flight attendant froze where she stood. A strange fear crawled up her spine. She looked down the aisle without knowing why. Her eyes stopped on the quiet black woman sitting by the window. And for the first time since the slap, the flight attendant felt something she did not understand. Fear. The airplane remained still on the runway. Outside, other planes slowly moved forward, one by one, but this plane did not. Inside the cabin, confusion grew with every passing second. Passengers looked at their watches again. Some sighed loudly. Others pressed the call button, asking for answers. The flight attendant tried to stay calm, but her hands were no longer steady. She walked quickly toward the front of the plane. Her heels hit the floor faster than before. The proud look on her face was gone. In its place was worry. Inside the cockpit, the captain sat stiffly in his seat. The phone beside him rang again. He listened carefully, his face slowly losing color. He asked a few questions in a low voice, then went quiet. When the call ended, he stared straight ahead for a moment, as if trying to understand what was happening. "This doesn't make sense," the co-pilot said softly. The captain took a deep breath. "It makes sense," he replied slowly. "Just not the way we expected." In the cabin, the black woman sat quietly by the window. She watched the ground crew walking outside. Her face was calm, but her eyes were sharp. She felt no joy, no anger. Only certainty. She had waited many years to be seen for who she truly was. If today was that day, she would face it with dignity. A passenger across the aisle leaned forward and whispered, "Do you think something is wrong with the plane?" Another replied, "I don't know. But this delay feels strange." The flight attendant returned from the front, trying to smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience," she said. "Please remain seated. We will update you shortly." Her voice sounded thin, even to her own ears. She turned and walked back down the aisle. Without meaning to, her eyes moved toward the woman she had slapped earlier. The woman did not look back. She sat still, hands folded, eyes forward. The flight attendant felt her throat tighten. She tried to shake the feeling away. "It's nothing," she told herself. "Just a delay." But the delay did not end. Another announcement came from the captain, but this time he did not sound calm. "Cabin crew, please report to the cockpit," he said. The flight attendant's heart jumped. She turned pale and walked quickly toward the front again. Other crew members followed her, their faces serious. Passengers watched silently. Something was clearly wrong now. Inside the cockpit, the captain stood up as soon as the crew entered. He did not smile. He did not greet them. "Is there a black woman seated near the window in row 12? He asked. The flight attendant froze. "Yes," she answered slowly. "Why?" The captain looked at her closely. "What happened earlier?" he asked. The flight attendant swallowed. "Nothing serious," she said quickly. "Just a small issue with seating." The captain's eyes hardened. "Did you touch her?" The room went silent. The flight attendant felt her chest tighten. I only did what was necessary," she said weakly. The captain closed his eyes for a brief moment, then opened them again. "You should not have done anything," he said firmly. "What is going on?" another crew member asked nervously. The captain picked up a document from the desk and held it in his hand. "This flight is grounded," he said. "By direct order." "By who?" the flight attendant asked, her voice shaking now. The captain looked at her, then looked away. "By the highest authority," he said. Back in the cabin, passengers grew more restless. Some stood up despite the seatbelt sign. Others demanded answers. The woman by the window finally moved. She adjusted her seat slightly and picked up her phone. A new message appeared on the screen. She read it once, then locked the phone. She took a slow breath. The captain's voice came through the speaker again, filling the cabin with heavy silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said carefully, "we are currently waiting for confirmation regarding a special matter." A special matter. Passengers looked at each other in confusion. The flight attendant stood near the front, her face tight with fear. Her mind replayed the slap again and again. The sound. The shock. The way the woman had looked at her afterward. Calm. Controlled. Unbroken. The flight attendant suddenly realized something that made her stomach drop. The woman never argued. She never begged. She never threatened. She only sent a message. The captain took one final call in the cockpit. When he ended it, his hands were trembling. He straightened his uniform, walked to the cabin door, and turned to face the passengers. His eyes scanned the rows slowly, carefully. Then he asked the question that changed everything. "Is the owner of this airline on board this flight?" The cabin fell completely silent. The cabin grew completely silent. Even the soft hum of the engines seemed to fade away. Passengers stopped whispering. Every eye turned toward the quiet black woman sitting by the window. Something in the captain's voice had made everyone freeze. The woman slowly straightened in her seat. She looked calm, almost serene, but there was a sharpness in her eyes that made people uneasy. She did not rush. She did not panic. She simply reached into her bag, slowly unzipped it, and pulled out a small, elegant card. The flight attendant, standing near the front of the cabin, froze mid-step. Her heels clicked against the floor as she stopped moving. Her hand was raised slightly as if she had intended to speak, but no words came out. The woman held the card out in front of her. Passengers leaned forward instinctively, curiosity taking over. The card read clearly, "Owner, Skyworld Airlines." Gasps filled the cabin. Phones clicked. Some passengers quickly pulled out their cameras. Others whispered in disbelief. The woman's calm presence seemed to fill the room. The power she carried silently was stronger than anyone had imagined. The captain turned pale. He stepped toward the cabin microphone, trying to regain control. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice shaking slightly, "the passenger in row 12, he hesitated, is the owner of this airline." The flight attendant's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her face turned pale. Sweat appeared on her forehead. She slowly looked at the woman she had slapped just moments ago. Every harsh word she had spoken, every insult, every action, it all came crashing back. The passengers could hardly believe it. Some started whispering, trying to make sense of the moment. She owns the plane," one man said. "The airline?" a woman asked in shock. The black woman remained seated, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She did not smile. She did not shout. She simply looked straight ahead, her eyes steady and unwavering. The flight attendant now understood something she had never imagined. The woman she had humiliated was not powerless at all. A few brave passengers began clapping quietly, slowly at first, then louder as they realized the truth. Others just stared in stunned silence. The air was thick with tension, disbelief, and shame. The flight attendant swallowed hard. She wanted to apologize, to explain, but the words stuck in her throat. She felt weak, small, and exposed. She had believed she held the power, but the reality was completely different. The woman finally spoke, her voice calm and clear, reaching everyone in the cabin. "You had no right to touch me. Not in words, not in action. You have humiliated yourself more than you have humiliated me." The flight attendant took a step back, her knees trembling. She looked around at the passengers, many of whom were staring at her judgmental now. Shame replaced her pride in an instant. Passengers whispered among themselves. Some felt sorry for the flight attendant. Others felt inspired by the woman's calm and controlled reaction. But one thing was certain, no one could ignore the truth anymore. The black woman slowly set her card back inside her bag. She adjusted her seat and leaned back slightly. For the first time since boarding, she allowed a small, confident smile to appear on her face. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but everyone could feel its strength. The captain cleared his throat, his voice now steadier. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We will resume our flight shortly." The flight attendant, still shaking, retreated to her position near the front of the cabin. She avoided looking at the woman again. Every memory of the slap, the insults, and her pride came back sharply, burning her from the inside. Passengers were still whispering, but now their whispers carried awe and admiration. The woman by the window had shown something no one could deny. Power does not always shout. Sometimes, it sits quietly, waiting for the right moment. And in that cabin, every single person realized that the quiet woman they had judged moments ago was the one holding all the power. The black woman sat there, calm and controlled, knowing that nothing would ever be the same on this flight, or for the flight attendant, again. The flight attendant stood near the front of the cabin, frozen in place. Her hands trembled, her face pale. For the first time in her life, she felt small, weak, and completely exposed. She had always believed that her authority gave her power over others, but now she realized she had been nothing more than a fool trying to control someone far greater than herself. Passengers whispered behind her back, some with shock, others with admiration for the woman by the window. Phones quietly recorded the scene, capturing the moment the truth had finally emerged. The flight attendant's breathing grew heavier. She felt all eyes on her, judging every past action, every insult, every word she had spoken. Her knees shook as memories rushed back, memories of the slap, the harsh word she had used, the smirk she had given. Every insult, every act of arrogance, now seemed hollow. The woman she had humiliated sat calmly, almost regal, as if she were untouchable. The contrast was unbearable. The woman by the window looked at the flight attendant slowly, her gaze steady and controlled. There was no anger, no hatred, only the quiet, undeniable weight of truth. It was a look that made the flight attendant feel like a child caught in a storm she could not escape. The flight attendant began, her voice breaking. She wanted to speak, to apologize, to explain herself, but the words failed her. She wanted to justify what she had done, but deep down, she knew nothing could undo the humiliation she had caused. Tears began to well up in her eyes. She dropped her gaze to the floor. Her pride had crumbled completely. She had believed she could humiliate someone weaker than herself, but now she was the one exposed, the one feeling helpless and ashamed. Passengers watched quietly. Some felt pity for the flight attendant, but most were struck by the power of the woman's silent presence. The entire cabin seemed to be holding its breath, witnessing a moment that would stay with everyone forever. The black woman slowly stood, her movements calm and precise. She adjusted her bag and leaned slightly forward. Every eye followed her. She spoke softly, yet her words cut through the tense silence like a blade. "I remember every slap I ever received," she said. Her voice was calm, not angry. "Every word spoken to make me feel small. Every moment someone thought they could control me. And I remember how I stayed silent, waiting for this day." The flight attendant's tears began to fall freely now. She dropped to her knees, her uniform wrinkled, her hands covering her face. Passengers looked on, some shocked, some relieved, all captivated. The once proud flight attendant was now reduced to someone who could only cry and regret. The woman by the window sat back down slowly, her calm returning. She did not yell. She did not humiliate her back. She simply sat with dignity, letting the flight attendant feel the consequences of her actions. The cabin seemed to shift. The atmosphere changed completely. Where there had been tension and judgment, there was now reflection. People realized the truth. Power does not always come from shouting or forcing others down. True power comes from patience, self-control, and the quiet strength to endure humiliation without losing oneself. The flight attendant whispered something inaudible, but it was clear she was asking for forgiveness. The woman did not respond immediately. She simply watched, her eyes steady, letting the flight attendant face her own guilt fully. Passengers remained silent, many moved to tears. Some could not believe what they had witnessed. The black woman, who had entered the plane quietly, seemed ordinary at first, but now she had revealed a strength and presence that no one could ignore. Finally, she leaned back in her seat, her hands folded neatly. Her eyes scanned the cabin for a moment, then rested on the flight attendant. Her voice, calm but firm, carried across the quiet plane. "I am not here for revenge, but the lesson has been learned." The flight attendant remained on her knees, broken and trembling. The message was clear. Silence, patience, and dignity had triumphed over arrogance and cruelty. And in that moment, everyone in the cabin understood exactly who held the real power. The woman by the window leaned back, closed her eyes for a brief moment, and exhaled slowly. The plane was still grounded, but something had shifted completely, not just the flight, but every heart and mind on board. The cabin remained quiet, but the atmosphere had changed. Passengers were no longer whispering in confusion. Instead, they were watching with curiosity and awe. Even the flight attendant, still on her knees near the front, dared not move. The black woman by the window remained calm, but her eyes now held a depth that made everyone lean forward instinctively, sensing that something important was about to be revealed. For the first time, she spoke more than just a few measured words. Her voice was soft but clear, carrying across the cabin without raising in anger. "You may think you know me," she began, "but you only saw a quiet passenger. You never saw my story. You never saw what it took to get here." Passengers shifted in their seats, intrigued. Even the flight attendant lifted her head slightly, listening. Her pride had been shattered, and now curiosity replaced some of the shame. "I grew up in a world that did not accept me," the woman continued. "People judged me by my skin, by the clothes I wore, by the life I had. I was told I would never be anything. I was mocked, ignored, humiliated, over and over again." Her hands rested calmly on her lap, but her eyes reflected the memories of those painful days. A few passengers gasped softly. Others leaned closer to hear better. The woman's words were simple, but the weight behind them was heavy. "I worked every single day to build something for myself," she said. "I learned to stay silent when people insulted me. I learned to control my anger when others tried to make me feel small. I kept my dignity, even when it seemed impossible. And I waited. I waited for the right moment." The flight attendant could no longer look directly at her. Shame had turned into a heavy, burning feeling in her chest. She remembered the slap, her arrogant words, her cruel laughter. Everything she had done to feel powerful now seemed meaningless. The woman continued, her voice calm, unwavering. "Today, I am here not to fight. Not to shout. Not to punish. But to show that strength is not in attacking others, it is in staying composed when you can destroy them." Passengers were silent, tears forming in some eyes. Many were inspired by the woman's story, realizing that her calm and dignity were not signs of weakness, but of immense power. Even the young girl a few rows back held her mother's hand tightly, eyes wide, understanding the lesson unfolding before her. The woman paused for a moment, then looked directly at the flight attendant. Her gaze was steady, almost piercing. "You may have thought you were powerful," she said softly, "but your strength was built on fear and arrogance. True power," she said, "is built on patience, respect, and the courage to endure humiliation without losing yourself." The flight attendant's tears flowed freely now. She could barely stand. Her uniform was disheveled, her pride completely destroyed. Every passenger could see the stark difference between the quiet woman by the window and the once confident flight attendant. The woman leaned back slightly, folding her hands neatly. She spoke to the entire cabin now, her voice carrying authority without shouting. "Let this be a lesson. Do not judge by appearances. Do not assume someone is weak because they are quiet. You never know the battles they have fought, or the strength they carry quietly inside." A few passengers nodded, some whispered agreements. Others wiped tears from their eyes. The plane remained still on the runway, but it felt like the world inside the cabin had shifted completely. The flight attendant finally spoke, her voice trembling. I am sorry." The woman did not respond immediately. She only looked at her, letting the apology sink in, letting the weight of the moment fully reach her. The silence itself was enough. Then, softly, she said, "Today, I will decide who you really are." Every passenger felt the tension rise again. They understood that a decision was coming, one that would determine the flight attendant's fate. Everyone leaned forward slightly, sensing that the story was far from over. The cabin remained still, the engine silent, the moment suspended. And in that stillness, it became clear, the quiet woman by the window was not just a passenger. She was a force. A story. A living lesson in patience, strength, and dignity that no one on the plane would ever forget. The cabin was tense. Every passenger watched the black woman by the window, waiting for her decision. Even the flight attendant, still trembling near the front, stared at her with fear and guilt. The air was thick with anticipation. Everyone knew that whatever happened next would change the lives of those on the plane forever. The woman remained calm, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her eyes scanned the cabin slowly, taking in every face, every reaction. She looked at the flight attendant for a long moment. No anger. No hatred. Only control. The flight attendant's pride had been shattered, and now she awaited judgment. The woman finally spoke, her voice low but firm, reaching everyone in the cabin. "You have caused pain," she said. "You humiliated me in front of strangers. You thought power was in your hand. But power is not in harming others. Power is in how you handle yourself when you have every reason to destroy someone." The flight attendant lowered her gaze. Tears fell freely down her cheeks. She knew that words alone could not undo the humiliation she had caused. She felt small, weak, and completely exposed. Every passenger could see her regret. The black woman continued, her voice calm but decisive. "You will not work on this flight again. You will be reported and removed from duty. But I will not humiliate you in front of everyone. That is the lesson you must learn." Passengers whispered quietly. Some clapped softly, inspired by the woman's strength and fairness. Others wiped tears from their eyes. The plane, which had been filled with tension and fear just moments ago, now seemed lighter, as if a heavy weight had been lifted. The flight attendant slowly got up, shaking, and whispered a broken, I understand." She did not speak further. She knew that any words could not change the lesson she had just received. The woman leaned back in her seat, calm and composed. She looked out of the window briefly, then turned to the cabin. "Let this be a lesson for everyone," she said. "Do not judge anyone by their appearance. Do not assume weakness because someone is quiet. You never know the battles they have fought, the strength they carry, or the respect they deserve." Passengers nodded silently. Some whispered, "She is amazing," or "I wish I could be that strong." Even the young girl in the back held her mother's hand tighter, eyes wide with awe. The engines outside roared back to life. The plane began to move slowly down the runway. Passengers adjusted their seat belts. The flight attendant remained near the front, her head bowed, fully aware of the lesson she would never forget. The black woman remained calm, her dignity intact. She did not seek applause. She did not need recognition. Her strength had spoken for itself. The cabin was filled with respect, admiration, and a quiet sense of justice. As the plane finally took off, passengers looked out of the windows at the shrinking city below. They felt a mix of relief and inspiration. They had witnessed something extraordinary. A quiet woman, judged by her appearance, had revealed her power not with anger, but with patience, dignity, and justice. The flight attendant, sitting quietly at the front now, whispered to herself, "I will never forget this." The woman by the window leaned back slightly, closed her eyes, and took a deep breath. She had shown the power of silence, the strength of dignity, and the lesson that true justice does not always shout. It waits patiently, and when the time is right, it shows itself clearly. The passengers, one by one, realized the truth. The real power is not in harming others, but in rising above it. And in that cabin, for everyone on board, that lesson would never be forgotten.